began in the winter of 2011. At that time, I was working north of the city, a little town called Aberdeen. I worked in a medical waste facility, and my job that winter was to run a large commercial washing machine which sterilized the sharps containers for all the hospitals and clinics throughout the province. My job entailed basically walking to one end of the machine, taking the racks that were full of needles off with the carts, putting them into a tipper machine, tipping them, taking them out, putting them into the washer, and then walking slowly to the other end where there were 3 racks of containers inside, taking them out, dipping them through sterilizers, and putting them on drying racks. And I tried very hard to get efficient at this process because it was rather a monotonous job. So I wanted to find a way to have this be beneficial. So what I did, believe it or not, I don't know how I did this, but I got so efficient at it that all I had to do was leave my body there. And then I could go somewhere else and think about things. It got to the point where I could leave my body there for 8 hours. People couldn't believe how it was that I didn't have to take breaks. I didn't have to take lunch break. I didn't have to eat all day. Because my body was just doing its thing, and I was off dreaming. And I dreamed about how much I loved this thing called walking. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I never calculated how many miles I must have walked every day, but it was constant walking. And I wasn't tired. So what began then was an obsession with the idea of walking. And this obsession grew through 3 phases. I would call it 3 phases. There was the dream phase. There was the desire phase, which I also call the sabbatical phase, and you might think I'm crazy here, but I've got it for proof in my notes there that I actually wrote the word sabbatical before I even knew what the word of the day. But there was the sabbatical phase, and then there was the action phase. So to cover off these phases, I'll tell you a little bit about them. During the dream phase, this was 5 years ago now, my kids were a bit younger, and they were kids when they're that young in their early teens, they're very idealistic. Dad, you're going to go for a big walk? We're going with you. And they wanted to go for miles with me. This was ideas of walking cross country. But unfortunately, maybe fortunately, my wife would have none of it. No, kids, you're not going on a big walk with that crazy guy, that old man of yours. It's not going to happen. So that got put on the back burner. But the dream never left me. And it turned into a desire. Because to me there's a difference between a dream and a desire. We can dream about things, but it doesn't seem like it's possible. But when desire, it grows stronger. And in the desire phase, I began to think of this thing called a sabbatical. Because you see, my sister is a professor, and she gets to have a sabbatical every 10 years or something. She goes off and does all these neat things. And I thought, I'm not a professor, but darn it, I can have a sabbatical. Somehow this has got to be. So what I realized was, when I was 18, I left home. In fact, my dad really encouraged us. He almost kicked us out of the house at 18, especially the guys. You got to go make a life for yourself. It's time for you to go. So I said to my kids, when you're 18, if you're still basement dwellers, I'm going to leave home for a while. So that's how the desire grew, and my wife came to accept it. And my kids became very supportive of it. So that led me to what I call the action phase. And the action phase was that all of a sudden it became real. I was going to do something. During the desire phase, I didn't have any concrete ideas as to where I was going to walk. I had general ideas of walking through the mountains and walking across the prairies and walking here, walking there. I had no real idea, but during the action phase, I had to realize I got to make a plan here. I have to know what I'm going to do. So, once it was okay with the family and I had saved up enough money, I booked a ticket to Victoria. And the plan was to start walking from Victoria through the mountains like Woodime. I'll be thinking of Woodime at that time, and as far as I could walk. And then I thought, there's more than just a sabbatical. It's more than just me enjoying myself. I might as well learn something. I might as well do something. I might as well dedicate this to something. And in the spirit of sabbatical, learning something in the process, I decided that, hey, there's this thing called Toastmasters. Toastmasters, I see in the magazine lots of times people standing at base camp at Mount Everest holding up the magazine or the CC manual, and they take a picture and write an article. So I sent an email to Toastmasters International, and a few weeks ago, a guy named Paul Stedman, he's the chief director of editing, I believe, senior editor of the Toastmasters magazine, called me back. And he said, we're very interested in what you're doing, want to know what you're doing because we want to feature you in the Toastmasters magazine. But that wasn't enough for me. See, because I had to have a reason for why I would stop at all these Toastmasters magazines, all these Toastmasters clubs across the country. So what I did is I realized I have to walk for freedom. Because you see, for me, freedom is way up here as a virtue in life. There's never a time where we can let ourselves say we already are free enough. People have fought and died for freedom, and I think the discussion is open about freedom. So I wish to be able to go from Toastmasters clubs to Toastmasters clubs and do speeches about freedom. My flag is a message of peace, it's a message of freedom, and it has my Twitter handle on it. #FreedomWalk, where you can find me. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Reddit, and you can find me on various different social medias where I will be posting my speeches, I will be posting comments, and you will see the man behind the flag of freedom. Which all began, as I will remind you, with a dream, which turned into a desire, which now is going to begin with action. On the 5th of March, this Saturday, I am flying to Victoria, where I will do the ceremonial toe dip in the Pacific Ocean and begin my walk east. And I hope you'll join me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, and on YouTube, and help me to embrace precious freedom and spread that message.